It's a wonderful thing. Those of us in this room, we have all, one way or another, military historians, whether it's just reading it, we're lucky enough to write it, research it, teach it, in my case, primarily tweet it. It's a lifestyle choice, amongst other things, that means we will never, ever be bored. The long and tragic catalogue of warfare in our history is, among other things, never-ending. It's gripping, it's a great body of work and ideas that 1,000 lifetimes could never do justice to. It's an oft-lamented fact of my marital situation that no romantic mini-break abroad is complete without an exploration of the region's military history. I've just come back, literally just landed, hence my tie has been donated by the kind people at the reception here. Just landed from a trip to the Bavarian Alps. So I need hardly tell you an area in which military past is not hard to find. Imagine my joy when we left the airport of driving past the airfield where the 262 was trialled. We obviously had to stop in Dachau concentration camp on the way to our Alpine retreat. And only last night I was sitting on a ski hill looking, and the sun was going down, very romantic scene. And I was looking at a German army unit that were teaching all their guys to ski very, very well, become downhill skiers. And I wondered aloud to my wife about whether or not the German army, sort of, all the old trite observations about generals fighting the last war, and whether these downhill skiers were absolutely necessary, or whether these young men would soon be re-rolled into cyber command. And as we sat there, I thought this mini break is going tremendously well. I enjoyed it enormously. I think we all do, military history utterly fascinating, because in fact we've been hearing about it just now. To look back on war is to study humans in the most extreme, and therefore I think some of the most revelatory circumstances that we'll ever face. One only needs to think today, in fact, is the anniversary of Zhukov's mighty counteroffensive outside Moscow in 1941. Which led to some of the most appalling fighting conditions and experiences that I've certainly have ever read about. And of course, the counterattack around Moscow shows the other great strength, the other great importance of military history. As well as being utterly absorbing, it's of course central to any understanding of the modern world. The near destruction of Army Group Centre, possibly the great turning of the tide of the Second World War, particularly the Second World War in the East, is one of the pivotal events of the 20th century. A great military story that shaped all of subsequent history, and indeed shaped our present as well. Another example, pure luck today, happens to be the anniversary of the Battle of Leuthen, which is one of my particular, I'm a 7 Years' War addict, and it's particularly important. The effects of that battle, of course, felt in Silesia, naturally, and the Prussian and Austrian states, but possibly more importantly, it's felt across in America, where a resurgent Anglo-Prussian alliance would allow Britain to really wipe out all of France's North American possessions over the next 4 years. I think the books all here today that we're here to celebrate and talk about demonstrate that war has shaped and tested every society on Earth, and there's every chance that it will continue to do so. We got talking today about Central Africa, but of course there's always tensions in Korea, the South China Sea, the bitterly fragmented Middle East, and separatist insurgencies in several of the vast multi-ethnic Asian states. There's plenty of conflict and areas in which can expect conflict to come. And if Plato was correct, and only the dead have seen the end of war, it does seem like what we're all here to celebrate and talk about today, which is studying military history, is a very important thing to do. We're blessed in Britain with a vibrant sector, if that's not too strange a way of putting it. These books are incredibly, are very best examples of a very rich and diverse genre, devoted to mastering war, understanding it, and of course hopefully avoiding it as well. The Royal United Service Institute is one of the oldest and most established bodies of its kind. It was founded by Wellington in 1831, probably one of his high points of his civilian premiership, and it's blazed a trail that many people have followed. It's here to think about war, its conduct and its impact, and it's of course for the benefit of the people, Parliament, and organisations, bodies like the press as well. It has an obligation under its Royal Charter to promote the advancement of the military sciences and literature. And really to that effect, The Medal for Military Literature was founded with the support of the Duke of Westminster in 1997, who is another Iron Duke. You can take it from me. He's my father-in-law, in case you... and it's awarded to any book by a living author, regardless of nationality, gender, or age. Anyone who makes a notable and original contribution to the issues of defence and security. The winners, the past winners, I'm sure you all know, and some of them are here, read like a roll call of our very finest historians and writers. Chairing the judging panel, we had Baroness Neville-Jones of Hutton Roof in the county of Cumbria, a walking advertisement for the House of Lords, I think. She entered the chamber in 2007 after a stunning career as a diplomat, and playing, of course, an important role at the Dayton Peace Accords that brought Bosnia to a close, bringing much needed experience and judgment to Westminster. Professor Michael Clarke, currently Director General of the Royal United Service Institute, we've heard already from him tonight, he's dazzled us. Dr. Jonathan Isle is the Director of the International Security Studies at RUSI, the Duke of Westminster Medal, and Editor of the Newsbrief. He speaks every language between here and the Volga, and has published, among other things, brilliant critiques of where the West went wrong in Bosnia. Nick Childs joined the BBC in 1982 from History at Oxford, becoming Defence and Security Correspondent, the BBC's first Pentagon correspondent, and now World Affairs correspondent. He's been everywhere, as you can see from your CVs that you've been supplied with. Professor Beatrice Heuser is a historian and strategist. She's taught right across Europe. Nuclear standoffs with Iran, old-fashioned resource scrambles in Asia is her meat and drink, and she's also been shortlisted for this award before. Dr. Philip Towell leans towards Cambridge, rather than the rest of the panel, who are a darker shade of blue. I suppose we had to have one of them. He's Deputy Director and then Director of the Centre for International Studies at Cambridge, and he's written prolifically on many subjects. That is the panel of judges, and if you can impress them, you have made it. And here's a brilliant group. I think I'm just going to go through the brilliant group of people who have made the shortlist this year. Anne Applebaum, American-born, educated at Yale, LSE, and St Antony's, Oxford. She wrote the brilliant Gulag, a history which we all know, I'm sure, in 2003, which won the Pulitzer Prize for non-fiction the following year. Building on this success, she has now produced a terrifying study of the ways in which Stalin reneged on wartime provinces to the Western powers and imposed a Soviet empire in Eastern Europe. That's the Iron Curtain, the crushing of Eastern Europe, 1944 to 56. John Philip Jones served as a national serviceman. He's worked in advertising, and yet he's still had time to write 10 books, all of which have been widely translated. He's visited numerous battlefields across the globe, and that's presumably on one of those trips he developed a great passion for Gallipoli. He's written a penetrating study of General C. N. Hamilton, of course blamed for many of the tactical errors that surrounded Gallipoli landings, and yet who went on to have a great influence in the future direction of warfare. That's Johnny, the legend and tragedy of General Sir Ian Hamilton. Next up, Alan Mallinson served in the British Army as a professional soldier for 35 years. He's commanded the Light Dragoons. He's been widely praised for his books, both fiction and non-fiction. I'm very glad we've had we're all okay to enjoy historical fiction. I feel a lot better now about reading my Airport Bernard Cornwell. Anyway, he's been widely praised for his fiction and non-fiction. Writes on defence matters from many broadsheets. He's been hailed by Anthony Beevor as one of the most astute defence analysts in Britain today. His timely study of the British Army in 1914 explores the fascinating and much debated role of the small but effective British Army in those first crucial months of World War I. That's 1914, Fight the Good Fight, Britain, the Army and the coming of the First World War. Mark Mazur is next, a graduate of Oxford and Johns Hopkins. He's a historian specialising in Greece and the Balkans, and a recent book on Salonika was particularly notable, winning the Duff Cooper Prize. He's currently at Columbia. He's given us a brilliant study of an idea, global governance, that once seemed inevitable, but is now under attack from both the great powers and the grassroots. That's governing the world, the history of an idea. Next up, Emil Simpson. Served with the British Army 2006-2012 as an infantry officer with the Gurkhas, or the Gurkha Rifles. He previously read history at Oxford and was a visiting defence fellow at St Antony's on the Changing Character of War programme. His book about modern warfare has received widespread and lavish praise. It is War from the Ground Up, 21st Century Warfare as Politics. Last but by no means least, David Scott, historian who's taught at York, Leeds, London, Yale and Cambridge. David's written extensively on Stuart Britain and Ireland. Drawing on this experience, he's written a broad study of one of the central questions of modern history. How and why did this funny little island cobble together the largest empire the world has ever seen and export so many of the ideas and practices that make up the foundation of our modern global system? That's Leviathan, the rise of Britain as a world power. Now, the moment we've all been waiting for. I'll open the envelope. I have no idea what's in this envelope. The Duke of Westminster Award, 2013, goes to Anne Applebaum for Iron Curtain.
I'm really, really pleased. Thank you so much. Thank you. Should I speak? Sorry? Do you want me to? Just a picture. All right. That's the easy part. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. I was planning to thank the Duke of Westminster. I now know that I should really be thanking the Duke of Wellington for founding the Royal United Services Institute. I am extremely flattered to win this award, given the range of books that have been that have been nominated, and even flattered to find myself in their company. One of the things I appreciated that Pauline just said, that you look for books that have a wider definition of what is conflict and what's a book about the military, what is fighting, and a broad definition of the roots of conflict. My book is a book about the Cold War, which was a war that was very often conducted not on the battlefield but in other ways, as a battle of ideas, through the use of violence that wasn't necessarily military, but conducted in other ways. And I very much appreciate that it's such a distinguished panel of military historians appreciate that the crushing of Eastern Europe, a word put into the title of my book by my publisher, who's right here, that the crushing of Eastern Europe was it was both a result of the Second World War, and it was a casus belli of the what we then later called the Cold War. I also appreciated what Michael Clarke had to say about the human face of war. My book is very much, although it's a narrative history, it very much focuses on individual people and their responses to an extraordinary situation. It started out by trying to answer questions: why did some people collaborate? And why did some people pick up arms and fight back? And for the people in between who were torn, the people who went to the May Day parade in the morning and then went home and listened to Radio Free Europe in the afternoon, how do you explain that behavior? And in order to understand that, I very much had to try to go back and put myself in the position of people at the time, not to make judgments now from my perspective, knowing what happened now about what happened then. While writing this book, I interviewed a Polish woman we were mostly talking about her joining the Communist Youth League as a teenager in Warsaw. And she says, when I think about it now I understand that I didn't have to join it. At the time, I didn't understand that. My parents wanted me to be in it. There was all kinds of pressure to be in it. And really, the writing of the book was an attempt to understand where that pressure came from. Why and how could people be coerced into behaving in a certain way? So thank you very much, Professor Clarke, for that introduction to the theme, the human face of history, and thank you again to the judges, and I do appreciate the wideness of the breadth of the panel, and I'm very honored. Thank you very much.
Speech and also the judges from the comments from the judges about the range and the breadth of the awards. It strikes me as unusual that we all find ourselves in agreement with Mao Zedong, who of course describes politics, warfare simply as politics with bloodshed, and I think that's probably particularly appropriate. Michael, thank you for starting us off with an excellent and very useful exploration of what good history is. It reminded us of the key thing we all can find quite tricky, which is that they did things differently in the past. It was a different place. Tonight we've seen 5 very good examples of brilliant history. From a Clausewitzian study of war from a young subaltern, to really big history, explaining British hegemony and the idea of global governance. And we've also got those two important works about World War I in there. And on that subject, I think I'll finish with a little thought tonight for everybody, which is about World War I. Next year is going to be a big bumper year for dodgy history and dodgy parallels. And there's going to be a lot of opportunities for the great and good in this room and for all of us to complain. But I also would urge you to remember there'll be a lot of opportunities as well to get involved and to try and shape that discussion, both in teaching circles and academia, but out there in the wider public as well. So actually, I'd perhaps to cite the Mayor of New York, I'd say tomorrow or next year, go to work and be brave.